suicide, some biblical narcotics, and Jesus' death. Today on another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. Today we are going through Matthew chapter 27 and Mark chapter 15, and tomorrow we're going to go through Luke chapter 23 and also John chapter 18 and 19. So let's jump in and see what the Bible has in store for us today. So we start out in Matthew chapter 27, where Jesus has just been handed over to Pilate. And of course we go through the fact that Judas hangs himself here in verses 3 all the way through verse 10. Now Judas here is his betrayer, right? And he was full of remorse for doing this, that so much so that he returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. And here on your screen will be a picture of that 30 pieces of silver. This is what 30 pieces of silver would look like. Doesn't really look like a ton of money there, does it? But then again, it is silver, so it is worth quite a bit. And this is actually what it would look like, as here, these were the actual shekels that would have been given to Judas. Now, when Judas gave this back to the priests, they were just like, so what do we care that you have this remorse and that you shed innocent blood? So he threw the silver into the temple and he left because he was upset with him. And then he just went out and he hung himself. The chief priest took the silver and said, "It's not permitted to put into the temple treasury since it is blood money." Wait, it's blood money? But wasn't it them who paid Judas the money in the first place? So the money that came from the temple paid Judas to betray Jesus, and then Judas gave the money back to the temple. But now that money is no good for the temple because it was blood money. So why is it blood money? Was it blood money because Judas accepted it? Or was it blood money because the priest paid it? Something to think about, right? Well, either way, they did not put the money back in the temple since the money was unclean at this point, and they bought the potter's field with it as a burial place for foreigners, for burying dead people. Go figure that one out. And then we get to verse 9. It says, "Then what was spoken through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. They took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him whose price was set by the Israelites, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me." Now, Matthew's appeal here to the Old Testament blends two different themes from Zechariah chapter 11 verses 12 through 13 and also Jeremiah chapter 32 verse 6 through 9. Now the first text in Zechariah describes Israel's rejection of its spiritual shepherd, the low estimation that they had of him, in other words, the value of him only being worth 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave, and also the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. Now the second text in Jeremiah assures that Israel will be restored after its devastation by the Babylonians. These two prophecies together do more than just foretell the events that are surrounding Judas's actions. By merging these two texts together, Matthew has shown here that Jerusalem's rejection of the Messiah would result in its destruction, but that God would restore the city in due time. So you got to think about this and think about some of the little details, but don't get too caught up in the details. For example, in Matthew chapter 27, verse 28, it says, when he was mocked by the military, they said that they stripped him and dressed him in a scarlet robe. They twisted a crown of thorns, put it on his head, and placed a staff in his right hand. Well, in Mark, it says that they put on a purple robe. So there's two completely different little things that are just different. But the point of it is that this event happened. You got to think about it from the perspective of the people that are watching, what's going on, what are these viewpoints, what they have been told about the events that's happened if they weren't physically there. Think about an event that happens and 10 people are there to watch it. And after the event's over, you go and ask those 10 people what they saw, and all 10 people are going to tell you something different, right? That's kind of what's happening here. So we get to, this was an interesting one to me, where in verse 34 of Matthew 27, it says they gave him wine mixed with gall. Well, in Mark's version of this, it's wine mixed with myrrh. So it's a very well-known historical thing that the Romans, they used to give They're prisoners who were about to be executed, no matter the manner of execution. They gave the prisoners who were about to be executed a mixture of wine and frankincense, or something that was bitter, right? Well, the word gall here, if you translated straight from the Greek word was chole, however you pronounce that. And that word in Greek actually means a bitter herb, something bitter to mix in with the wine. And that made it basically into a narcotic type substance that would numb your body, dull your senses, maybe even dull your wits. So myrrh would have been the choice of the time there. And I found it very interesting that Jesus refused to drink it. And this expresses his determination to suffer the full agony on the cross. He did not take it so he would not have his senses dulled. He would not have the feeling dulled. And by doing this, so it could have actually sped up his death in a way, or any number of other things. But he fully experienced this on the cross. So this narcotic, this substance to dull his pain, he did not drink it. And I find it also very interesting that myrrh, if you think about myrrh from the book of Mark, wine mixed with myrrh, what were the three gifts that the wise men brought Jesus? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. A gift that was given to Jesus at his birth resurfaces here again at his death as another gift to him. How interesting is that? So, we get into the death of Jesus, and we go from verse 45 of Matthew 27 on through. And in verse 45, it says, "From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over the whole land." Keep that in mind, okay? Now, the bystanders here during this time frame, this 3-hour time frame, the bystanders naturally would have interpreted this darkness that came over the land as God's judgment, right? Well, yes, but they likely thought that this judgment was against Jesus, as if he were a heretic. In the light of his later resurrection, though, they probably came to see this darkness as judgment against the sins of the world that Jesus came to forgive us from or take away from us on our behalf. And we get to verse 46 here in the words that Jesus said, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Jesus' lament here quotes Psalm 22, verse 1, and the psalm reads as if it were written by someone standing near the cross. Jesus' cry expressed the alienation from God that he endured as he bore the Father's wrath against sin. Now, although Jesus elsewhere addressed God as Father, he addressed him as merely my God here in this verse. We get to verses 50 through 51, and Jesus' death at 3 p.m., remember, it says from noon until 3 there was darkness. When he died at 3 p.m., this coincided with the afternoon sacrifice at the temple there. So, thus the priests would have been present at the temple to observe the rending of this curtain that was torn, the curtain of the sanctuary that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple. Now, according to the Mishnah, it was 60 feet long, 30 feet wide, and as thick as a man's palm. That's pretty thick. So it was super heavy. It was so heavy, in fact, that it took 300 men to lift it up when it was wet. And that it was torn into two from the top to bottom shows that it was torn by God himself, because this signified that Jesus' death granted sinners new access to God. It tore open this veil between people and the Holy of Holies in the temple, which is what it was covering up. So that veil is torn. We have now complete visible access to God, both physically in that temple and now figuratively in our lives as well. So let's move on to a little tidbit in Mark before we finish up for the day. And what I have for you in Mark here is just something small, just a small little piece. Verse 32, the end of verse 32 in Mark chapter 15, it says, "Even those who were crucified with him taunted him." So you notice the two sinners on each side of Jesus. That's pretty much where Mark left it. He didn't give any more details about what they said to him, why they said it, who they said, I mean, why they were taunting him as well while they were hanging there dying themselves. But tomorrow, when we read Luke chapter 23, we will get the rest of the story when we find out that one of them actually repents. So, I hope this has helped you with your studies today. If it has, click that like button and subscribe button. Of course, click the little jingle bell so you get notified the next time I upload a video. If you're rumbling with me on Rumble, hit that little boxing glove. And I'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. I'll see you then.